Ever wondered what it'd be like to fight a fridge in combat, especially one made in Russia? Well, I'll tell you now, the Germans have experience. Introducing the Russian KV-2, also known as the Death Fridge. In this video, I'm going to go over the life of the KV-2, its conception, its production, and its combat record. So if you're interested in a fridge that fights back, stick around. The life of the KV-2 started when the Russians were starting to have some issues during the Winter War in Finland. With the heavily fortified Mannerheim line, they wanted a tank that was fitted with a heavy howitzer to deal with concrete bunkers, while supporting the KV-1 units. With this, instead of producing an SPG, self-propelled gun, they decided on using the same turret ring as the KV-1 to accommodate a fully traversed, redesigned turret that housed the massive howitzer. With the decision, it gave the KV-2 a unique look to it, with its towering turret, which required a ladder to get into compared to the earlier KV-1s. With the new turret design, it made it a much bigger target than previous tanks and made the tank very top-heavy. The commander of the 7th Army, Kirill Meretskov, made some forceful requests for a bunker-busting heavy tank. With said request, a few projects were undertaken. One was made by the group OKMO as one of their last projects before being disbanded. They took the T-100 hull, which was left behind before, and wanted to mount a powerful B-13 130mm naval gun, designating it the SU-100Y. It was rejected because of lack of naval guns and semi-armor piercing rounds. The second attempt was to mount the 152mm BR-2 howitzer or a 203mm B-4 howitzer on a lengthened KV hull, but was never completed. The third and final design, as it was the chosen one, was completed in 2 weeks and was armed with the 152mm howitzer and 2 DT machine guns mounted on an unmodified KV chassis. With the decision being made, it started production and was designated the KV-2. However, there were some debates on if the prototypes even saw combat, but recent evidence suggests that the Marikovs and others reports on the excellent results achieved against fortified positions and pillboxes that were already captured. With it having one of the most unique silhouettes of World War II, the hull was no different than the KV-1, but if they wanted to fit the massive 152mm L-20 howitzer, they would have to create a box-shaped 12.9-ton turret. With its new turret, it sat at a staggering 11.3 feet tall compared to the 8.9 feet KV-1. In October 1941, KV-2 production was halted as Soviet factories were relocated and moved eastwards to avoid German capture. Designation between the two models varies between sources and can be confusing. The earlier model of the KV-2 had a more sloped turret compared to its later model, and was the lesser produced model. With some German sources, this model was referred to as the KW-2, though sometimes they were referred to as KV-2 M1939 and KV-2 M1940. The turret was simply called Big Turret. The later model featured the more common boxy turret with an improved rear turret hatch, making it easier to load the vehicle. The turret armor was kept the same as the previous model, but with the angled front removed, it made it roomier for the crew, giving them better work conditions, especially for the loaders. In German sources, this model was referred to as the KW-2B. It does sometimes get wrongly designated as the KV-2A, KV-2 M1940, KV-2 M1941, or KV-2B. The turret on this model was simply called Reduced Turret. Besides the 152mm howitzer, some early production models were fitted with the 122mm 1938 L22.7 howitzer. The number of KV-2 fitted with the 122 is unknown, but were very limited before being upgunned to the 152. An unknown number of the reduced turret KV-2s were captured by Germany and tested in Berlin, and then fitted with a new commander cupola, then sent back to the front line. The most interesting variant was a KV-2 armed with a 107mm gun, also known as the KV-2 ZIS-6. This variant only happened because during that time, the idea of super heavy tanks was still on the table. Even with that said, there were no plans to serially produce KV-2s with 107mm guns. Instead, just before the siege of Leningrad, a KV-2 with the 107 was made and sent for fire testing in March 1941. The 107mm gun was going to be mounted on vehicles such as the KV-3, KV-4, and the KV-5, but they were never picked up and stayed as drawings on a board. After that, all the 107mm guns were destroyed and work on super heavy tanks was eventually stopped. By the time it was sent to do what it was originally made for, aka destroying more fortified Finnish defenses, they were already overrun. Despite that, they were still able to destroy some enemy strongholds and AT guns. At the time, Finnish AT guns were ill-prepared for the KV-2's strong Russian armor, and reports say that they stopped firing after 3 non-penetrations. In the opening years of World War II, the KV-2s would operate in vast numbers, being virtually invulnerable to direct fire from high-velocity guns at horrifyingly close ranges. The best the enemy could do at the time was disabling the vehicle and hoping the crew abandoned it, but that wasn't always the case. A clear example of this is when roughly 20 KV-2s of the Soviet 3rd Mechanized Corps met the assault of the 6th Panzer Division with approximately 100 vehicles. A KV-2 tank managed to hold off the German advance for a full day while being pummeled by a variety of anti-tank weapons until eventually the tank ran out of munitions and was finally knocked out. Some say the Germans retrieved the crew of the KV-2 and gave them a proper burial, and some say they escaped at the bottom of the tank in the middle of the night. With it having an immense gun and vast armor, its mobility during engagements was very limited by the initial gear and transmission issues seen on the KV-1. The road speed of the KV-2 was no more than 25 km per hour, 15.5 miles per hour, and it could only reach 12 km per hour, 7.5 miles per hour, off-roading, making it a very slow vehicle. Besides all the issues plaguing the KV-2, it was still a formidable opponent if dug into a strategic position. The worst problem with the KV-2 was its unreliability. The gearbox would often break easily, and the immense recoil of the gun meant the small turret ring would often jam, or the engine or gearbox would suffer severe damage. The majority of KV-2 losses in 1941 were due to breakdowns or lack of fuel, forcing the crews to abandon the vehicle. The 41st Tank Division lost 2/3 of its 33 KV-2s, but only 5 were a result of combat due to landmines, as enemy AT guns were insufficient at taking out the KV-2. Marshal Rokossovsky later recalled in his Memoirs, "A Soldier's Duty." They withstood the fire of every type of gun that the German tanks were armed with, but what a sight they were returning from combat. Their armor all pockmarked all over, and sometimes even their barrels were pierced. Similarly, the experience of the 1st Panzer Division on 23rd June 1941 in Lithuania proves just how resilient the KV-2 could be. Here is a record of the engagement. Our companies opened fire from 700 meters, 765 yards. We got closer and closer. Soon we were only about 50 to 100 meters, 55 to 110 yards, from each other. A fantastic engagement opened up, without any German progress. The Soviet tanks continued their advance, and our armor-piercing projectiles simply bounced off. The Soviet tanks withstood point-blank fire from both our 50mm and 75mm guns. A KV-2 was hit more than 70 times, and not a single round penetrated. A very few Soviet tanks were immobilized and eventually destroyed as we managed to shoot at their tracks, and then brought up artillery to hammer them at close range. It was then attacked at close range with satchel charges. Well, that's the life of the KV-2. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about such a fascinating tank as much as I enjoyed researching it. If there's another tank you'd like me to do a life of video, please put it in the comments and I'll add it to the list. Other than that, I hope you guys learned something today and have a wonderful day. Bye! The life of the KV-2 started when... Okay, that was a horrible fucking start. I gotta sound... I gotta sound more enthusiastic. Shut up. Alright. With the heavily fortified... Fuck. Damn it. I didn't learn how to say that word. With the heavily fortified Mannerheim line, they wanted a tank that was fitted with a heavy howitzer to deal with the... Fuck you, Zach. The commander of the 7th Army, Kirill... Fuck, I already... 2mm howitzer and a 2... And I said, and a fuck. With the decision being made, it started production and was, with the decision being made, it was, fuck. With the decision being made, it started production and was, I'm like, and others reports on the excellence, KV-2 production was halted, not haunted. Ooh, spooky tanks. Ooh. But we're very limited. I'm just gonna turn it into a beat every time. The 3rd Mechanized Corps met the assault of the 6th Panther. Dude, why can't I read, Zach? I cannot read. Due to landmines, its enemy AT guns were insufficient at not making out. I'd love to make out the KV-2. Ugh.